Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I hope you're all having a good Dhul Hijjah, getting in a couple of Nafil fasts, inshallah. Maybe some tahajjud, maybe extra zikr. You go on a walk, you just do zikr the whole walk, and then you're like, what am I? I've been doing zikr this whole walk. Maybe I should like stop doing zikr. I can think about stocks or whatever, whatever. Oh, what am I going to do at the end of the month? So maybe the Zikr is better. I don't know. Maybe you have something better to contemplate. I do enjoy my pensive walks of deep problem solving. But I feel like lately, to some extent, my genius has been titrated into the AI system. The I just assume the AI is going to have better ideas. So I don't contemplate deep problems like I used to. And I just realized that maybe that's something I should work on. But I want to talk about something else that I've been working on, which is my heart, the kalb, the purification of the one self, the tazkiya or tazkiya, I think is more correct. Um, and I was talking to my neighbor who is also you know, got a restraining order from his ex, kind of like divorced dad type dude. Not formally married, but it's the same. To me, it's the same. I'm going to do an episode about the structure of Nikah and what I understand to be the Quranic and historic nature of Nikah and its flexibility. And wherein I consider people who've been practically married to basically be married. So does the law, by the way. It's called a common law marriage. So anyway, um, we're talking as we often do about women and about relationships in our life and trying to make sense of this thing because we're basically like the only human contact that he and I have. He has people at work. I work from home. I meet people in the stores. So I've been quite isolated these last months. So he's kind of my bro at this point. And and I asked him, "Hey, when you were getting to the point of breaking up, did you by any chance get angry with your pareja, as they call them here?" And he was like, "Wow, yeah, I mean, of course, you know." He goes, of course, everybody gets angry in relationships from time to time, do we not? Um, but I think, and then I explained this. I had this theory, it kind of clicked because I've been getting to know um, divorced women in my talkings, which has also been helpful for me to. And then if somebody doesn't like you, you feel a little bit bad, so you move on by like talking to more new people, and then some of them reject you, and some of them talk to you, and then they drop you, except for maybe once you have this conversion funnel. So you got to do numbers, but that's kind of our job, I think, is to get out there and do the numbers. And it's women's job to go, I don't, no, I don't think so. Or to go, this might be the needle in the haystack, and that's a hard problem, a needle in a haystack problem. It's called a search problem in computer science, but we apply it to the journey of the heart in how we ultimately create the next generation. And we select genes for those people. And not only that, but we select memes because we expect that this person is going to stick around. We're going to do, I think it's R type selection. I think K type is where it's high replication. We're going to do high individual investment for per child, even if we have 5 children. Still, we're going to like make them all go to madrasa or whatever, right? We're going to get them what we consider to be a classic education, and we're going to try and also, ideally, God willing, give them a great example of a loving spouse couple who are functional and who don't do awful fighting in public in front of the children. Well, sometimes that doesn't work. And, the Quran teaches that Allah loves those who swallow, it's in your throat. You're vomiting it up, the anger, but then you swallowed that acid, even though it was very unpleasant to do and the opposite of the momentum of your instinct in the moment. So it takes great proprioception. It takes physical control of your own body and your own integrated self. And as Muslims and as people who are educated in Sufi psychology, we should transcend this Cartesian thing, and we should really be integrated. That the qalb is also like a spiritual organ. It's like a quantum non-local electromagnetic vortex, whatever, whatever the reality of it is in deep physics. But it's a physical thing, and we're physical people, and all of this, right? So you inhabit a gestalt of embodiedness, and you try to act decisively. This is a great advantage of this tradition as opposed to maybe like Western Buddhism or Western esotericism, um, I believe. And this is why the Salah is open eyed. So, circling back to the original thread, in order to avoid becoming angry when perhaps you are facing nushuz, we'll get more into that later. You are being provoked, and it is infuriating. And not only is it infuriating, there is a mix of other emotions. She's leveraging something. She knows the chink in your armor. She knows your psyche well, and then for whatever reason, she's in a mood to like. She's smart too, and she threads that needle, and she said, and she like Kunoichi style, like geisha court assassination, flicks that needle right through the chink in your armor, right into your heart, and then bloody twists it, mate. She comes up and gives it a little as you try to continue into the conversation. You're trying to de-escalate, but she's not letting you de-escalate. She's escalating. I mean, it's like with Iran and the USA. um, Israel kept blowing up. They were the ones to escalate the first, so you couldn't stop Israel. So your wife is like the United States, and it's like, maybe we can, like, the United States is great to do business with if we can make it work. Okay, but then there's Israel, and Israel is her nafs or her quarine, perhaps. It could be said that most Muslims are not free of a jinnic influence, the waswas, etc. And that there are like ideological jins. So when someone's like a Marxist Muslim or a feminist Muslim, which is where we're going to get deep here a little bit later, as we discuss the shoes and Surinisa, or a libertarian Muslim or Quranist Muslim or a Shia Muslim or et cetera Muslim, that these ideologies have a risk of creating a procedural and epistemic shirk, which is in a sense also a form of kufr, which then opens you up to being befriending a jinn who is similarly ideological on like the jinternet, if you will, that they get these vibes and they feel you out and they love you, like they want to party, like the jinns who are not shayateen but who are not pious Muslims, who, like many of us, are in the middle. Maybe they are nominally Muslim, or maybe they're Christian, or maybe they're Buddhist, right? They have all the ideologies, right? These jinn will essentially gas you up to be more individualistic, which can maybe be good. So there's the Ibn Arabi talks about the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he claimed to have made his jinn a Muslim. And so there's this is an esoteric threat. This is not normative Islam. Usually they would just say, if you're a Muslim, you don't have a Qur'an because Qur'an are for kafirs and you're not a kafir, so forget about it. Yet everybody talks about in Ramadan the jinn are chained up. And I experienced this, and I also experienced that I'm getting a break from these bastards in these days of Dhul Hijjah, alhamdulillah. Like I'm really getting a Ramadan type vibe in these days, and I love it actually. I enjoy Dhul Hijjah actually a little bit more than Ramadan. I kind of wish there were like two other periods where you had a 10 days and then an Eid, and we kind of chopped up Ramadan into more of those, yeah. And so it's just, but anyway, I didn't make those. I didn't do the calendar. That's on God. That's fine. But I like Dhul Hijjah. Case in point. So I'm like a very easygoing guy, but I got to be real. I came to realize and accept my culpability in my failures in relationships based on me getting angry. And I appreciate that when you're being provoked to anger and you try to do an off ramp and you try to do an off ramp, and the other person is stepping up. But notice what they're doing is they're not like, sometimes women will grab a knife and threaten with a knife, but usually most of the time these women are not doing this. I've experienced physical, and catch it, Nope. It's like you're like Neo in these domestic violence situations. No, that was with the Argentine uh, sort of wives, I guess you'd call them. And I don't know. In a way, I almost preferred the getting physically abused to getting emotionally abused. But whatever, it's marriage. I think that we're all abusive to some extent. And I think that it's also abuse inculcates abuse, right? So it goes in intergenerationally, can also happen. Somebody might get abused by a stranger, whatever, or by another kid growing up. So that might leave a scar. I found that I became more toxic in relationships as I suffered more abuse over the years in my 20s. And I slowly got better over my 30s with the help of a loving and supportive partner. But then in the process, in the process, she became inculcated with my abusive shit that I was growing out of. And astaghfirullah. It's actually Shakespearean to really see like what happened and go, oh man, it's like Tenet, man. It's like Memento. It's like what? Like um so yeah, I in the process of growing, I was also the author of my own marriage's destruction. Um in a way that I kind of hoped that I would be able to roll back, but the trend just prevailed the other direction. Okay. But what I've noticed talking and looking at like Muslim marriage and I'm getting recommended Muslim girls with taste is like a new subreddit. And I appreciate taste. So I thought, oh, that's tasteful. And I didn't follow because man, it's like not my place. And I respect that they want to have like a space. But they just pop up because the algo recommends it anyway. And it seems like a lot of these Muslim women, so you might think, well, it's the feminism, we got to fight back. A lot of the Muslim women who are not Quranist or who or do not identify as progressive, and they will nominally maybe say something like, yeah, if it's in Sahih Bukhari, I believe Aisha was such and such age, and I don't understand it, but who am I to question a lot? So they're a little bit more pious than some of the sisters in the progressive Islam, or maybe they're less pious in a way because those other sisters are doing ijtihad. And in my madhab of Mutaziliya, ijtihad and the clarification of things is a form of ibadah rather than it's just Qaleed and Ijma is like this third thing. Okay. Anyway, you know that. I hope I know. And if you don't, then practice ijtihad as a form of worship and be epistemically humbled in the process, inshallah. And I have been epistemically humbled by love and life and feeling and also that I see what these women are saying. They're complaining about the husband. Like this husband wasn't physically abusive in the sense of, he wasn't laying hands on her, but he punched a wall. Yeah, he punched into the drywall. Drywall gives pretty easily, so a good punch will compact the drywall and leave a crater. And the reason why I believe so many men have experienced punching a wall at some point in their lives, especially by the age of like 30, I would say it was more concentrated before 30, is at some level, yeah, it's like throwing the punch is this bestial anger that gets built up. But at another level, it's kind of like, having a nervous system response to a strong emotion of anger, which has a purpose of saving your life. because you don't accept you're emotionally affronted by somebody trying to like stab you to death, for example. And so you get angry and you're willing to take a slice in the hand because you're angry and you're gonna twist them around and get them on, you know, that's what anger is for, right? And there's a hadith where in some version it's the prophet, in the other version it's the wali, his younger cousin. But in either case, he's gonna kill a guy, and the guy like spits on him or insults him or something, and then he stops. He's like, and the guy's like, "I thought you were gonna kill me," and he goes, "I was going to kill you for Allah, but now I'm angry. So if I kill you now, it's gonna be to please myself, and then it won't. It's not right. I shouldn't do that. It's a worthless kill. It's not for God. You know, it's gonna be avoided." And the guy's like, "Whoa, I'm gonna become a Muslim. That's crazy. Like y'all got tact in class, you know. That's like that's a principle, you know. I respect that." Or he became a Muslim later, right? But it's a nice story. I quite like that one. And this is the kind of thing that people vibe with, and they feel it's like the Jedi, right? The Jedi are based on Sufi masters, right? The whole point of the Jedi is like they don't get angry. And so I was pitching Broski last night. This theory that came together is like, yeah, it's a Hegelian. You know, there's this trend and there's this trend, and we crossed in the middle like 40 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago, depending on how you want to quantify it. Um, but 20 years, 40 years ago was sort of the cresting of second wave feminism, which then spawned a large number of careers of women, especially in countries like the United States and in Europe, um, where women end up becoming by now they're like baby boomers or Xers, and they're in amazing positions of economic and status and power and running organizations. They're the managers now. So feminism, so first wave feminism gave us obviously voting trends, which were leftward, right? And I'm not the kind of guy who goes, well, that's because women, because leftism is always bad and leftism is a fixed thing. I'm like, I'm talking about Hegel. Like, I'm aware that Overton windows move over decades and centuries, maybe even not at a steady pace. Maybe they have, as Lenin said, weeks where decades happen, right? And this is a decade, I believe, where a millennium or whatever centuries are happening. By the way, not to get too out of scope. Kind of the point of why we need to talk about this stuff is because if humanity as a species is so occupied with fighting their heart, you know, their spouse, and they break up and then and then you spend time like, oh, but I feel bad about the past. And then you spend time like, oh, but I'm horny. And what am I going to do about that? And then you spend time being like, oh, and I'm wistful for the future. I want another love or something, you know? And then you got to deal with the legal system and you got to spend this money and you're living in different places. That's more money. And it's hard for the kids and you know, why are we spending so much time and money and heartache and energy like wasting our futile efforts to enjoy life with somebody whilst we're being shaken down by tech oligarchs who are creating a new type of life form that will, you know, maybe give us some money in some short term, but is it begs tremendous questions about human sovereignty and survival. uh, what these guys are doing and why aren't we focusing on the bigger picture? So we'll get to that some other time. But staying on point today. So I got better at managing my anger, and there were periods where I was able to take a lot of verbal abuse. There was one point where my ex would have been having like a manic crisis, and she got extremely triggered by the kid and me raising my voice to like control the kid, which she does, but I wasn't allowed to do because my voice is a trigger warning because of the past. You see, from when the relationship was worse. So towards the end of the relationship, I got better at it, but there's still perhaps there's still room there's still room for improvement. And I really think that it's a stoicism strategy that men have to adopt because in the past we had a social pressure density where you would just assume that yelling at people or possibly giving them a little tap or whatever would be effective at getting results and that it would be socially accepted and completely normalized. And we're coming out of that. We've been coming out of that for about 80 or 100 years, maybe less, 60 to 70, you might say. Basically, it was pretty much in effect still when my father was born, and not significantly contested. We're talking about post-war America, the imperial highs of the 1950s. This is not famous for being a culture of like, wait a minute, are we like we need to revise power structures, right? That came later. So the world he was born into is still very much this older world, and it's over. It's so over, dude. I was watching a clip of Crocodile Dundee from the '80s, and he's gonna get robbed. This guy pulls a knife on him, and he's with a woman, right? And he pulls out his big Australian Bowie knife, and he's like, "Now this right here is a knife, mate." And the guy freaks out and runs off. And the woman goes, "Wow, Dundee, like I didn't know you carried a knife around with you all the time. That's really great." And I just thought, like, man, if something like this happened in New York City today, Crocodile Dundee would be ostracized by the woman. Like, oh, you're like a dangerous, violent man. You carry around a huge knife, and he's like, well, it saved us from getting robbed, then just then, didn't it? And she's like, yeah, but I just don't know if I feel comfortable. In his HR Manhattan accent. And I don't know if I mean I'm sure Crocodile Dundee would be okay in the 2020s, but he's just from a different time, like movies made in the 1980s were still made in this transition period, and they glamorized old school human stuff that is just not in right now. Suffice to say. Um and what I think is happening as well is that because women know that they could theoretically be the CEO of a corporation. Now, after AI kind of rearranges the economy in the coming years, I don't know if that's going to be the hangover from second wave feminism. So anyway, about um, 30 odd years, 30 to 40 years after the beginning of the second wave, we get the beginning of the third wave in the 1990s with bell hooks and intersectionality. And I think intersectionality is really cool. My only problem with intersectionality is that I'm not allowed to participate in it. So I think on the face of it, it's a cool concept. And Islam has something like intersectionality, which is this anti-racism that is grained into to some extent Islam. And of course, there's Arab supremacy and there's anti-black stuff. There's the Arab African slave trade. This is like arguing about Christianity or Islam having like more fatalities in the Middle Ages. Like, look, it was the Middle Ages. This is what I'm getting at is that we're Austin. A lot's changed since 667. Okay, like it's over. Um, okay, so I think what kind of happens is that the women will experience nashuz differently. So like everybody experiences some level of rebelliousness emotionally, but it might just be an occasional thought or flicker. But even if it's a strong emotion, you can still choose to be loyal, even if you're kind of like, okay, because you like bite your tongue. You're like, I don't agree with what faction is currently leading strategy, but I still care about the country or the organization, whatever, right? And this is that it's that kind of twist and tucking in that feeling instead of it being expressed as shoes, which makes a marriage good for a man, and vice versa. This isn't one of those gender puzzles where one gender experiences things pretty differently. I think we all want the same level of like team player confidence as the base of the marriage. And then if the marriage has a lot of other problems, you're not that attracted, or vice versa, and you kind of people are looking around. or there's problems with money, there's a lot of money stress, whatever, right? Like as long as you maintain that base, there's like a confidentiality agreement and there's a respect, there's boundaries that you don't cross in trying to leverage on people, then that's great. But unfortunately, that's not the culture of relationship maintenance that we teach in the modern world at this in this generation and the one kind of before it and the one kind of after. It is taught, and the current is in religious upbringings, but that's diluted by other factors as well. And what it really is, I think, is just it has to do with power dynamics ultimately. So because we've had these trends of progress, a man might have more power in the relationship still, like a classical trad wifing, whatever, right? He's putting up the money, but she still has a lot of leverage. And so Nishuz becomes a bit of a strategic or tactical feint to provoke a situation. Um, and of course, I'm reminding myself of Sean Connery when he was interviewed by Barbara Walters in the 80s about if he believes wife beating is okay. And he goes, well, if a woman is turning it into a provocative situation, you try to give her the last word, but she's not happy with the last word. Then I think it's absolutely right. And this is your classical kind of thing as well, actually. And this is just how everybody used to think. Nobody was like, wait a minute, maybe men shouldn't have the right to beat their wives. Nobody's, they were busy arguing about if it's a geocentric universe or heliocentric orbits. Okay, like they weren't there yet. They had other things to settle first before they even thought about that. Um, but anyway, I think we all agree that the past is over. And yet, as William Faulkner said, the past isn't over, it isn't even past. And we as men are angry, and I can see that it's unacceptable to women. We get angry sometimes, and it's not acceptable to women. We do that, even if we're only punching the wall or talking insults. And it might not even be severe insults, but that is what I'm getting in common from the survey of women perspectives from like Reddit. By the way, that's my first citation is Reddit. It's not, it should be like the third citation. By talking to women who have been divorced, and it might even have been a long time, but they're still very emotionally raw. And that sensitivity and that feeling is a deep resonance, actually, even if in many cases, I'm not going to continue into a relationship. I'm not going to get into nikah with every woman that I talk to. Um, but I was hoping that women would come up with like sophisticated analyses of why their relationship failed. And we're like, maybe, it was like 70% his fault and 30% my fault. I could have done this, and that better. But they don't experience it that way. Like I have a very analytic understanding of how my marriage failed. I've got multi-year graphs on different dimensions. Doesn't matter. By the way, but I can I apply that to improve? Yeah, I mean that's what I'm doing right here. But and not everybody has to do that. So I completely respect that all these women generally just express dissonance and pain from having to like re reimagine and remember those times. Um, and they often also do not say, but you know what? Like, despite the bad things in the marriage, I'm glad that the marriage happened, which I think is a shame. And I don't think people who've been through divorce should, what male or female should live with that. I think you should be grateful to God for everything that happened, the good and the bad, what the bad taught you and what the good gave you. And I would like to see more of this about the exes. Instead of seeing them as like competition, be like, oh yeah, your ex is stupid. I mean, like not like me. I'm like doing the sales pitch. I actually I think about these men and I wonder about their interiority and how different we really are. You know, not to say that I like identify with them and I presume their innocence or guilt. I've been thinking about all of these people's emotions and what we're all experiencing together. This pain, this phantom pain, if you will, um, and the theophany in the Quran that among Allah's signs is that He created spouses for us and placed Allah placed in between us mercy and love, you know. And Allah, if you were not, you know, going to live up to what Allah wanted, then He will replace you with new converts to Islam who He will love and who love Him. Right, this kind of divine love tariqa concepts, which is vaguely perennialist, but that's kind of what got me into Islam. Actually, it's like a source of structured masculine conceptuality for me. Islam that I find when purified in this lens, because obviously we know there's there's a lot of the dark eras among the Akis today and in the history, but for me it really works as an exercise of embiggening my my inner my inner potential of like being kind of like friendly strength person, not just to somebody I'm in an intimate relationship with, but to the kids and to the homeless people and old people and to the bros and to the intellectual public through scholarship and shit as well, you know. Um, so I just want to stop and just say how much I love Islam as I understand it in this way. I know there are a lot of Muslims who don't quite love Islam in the same way because they're thinking of it differently and they're thinking of it more like I just don't want to get tortured. But that's the beautiful thing about the mustahab aspects of the Sharia, which you can get cleanly from the Quran. This isn't pure fiqh mania, um, because sometimes there are patterns in the Quran where Allah talks about something and then has a very serious threat, and it's like, if you do this, you're done, like murder, right? So that's a major sin. And then Allah talks about things it doesn't like, and you go, well, that's a minor sin, or that's makruh. That's more of a thick-brained category, but okay, it's necessary so people don't call everything haram that they don't like. And then there are things that's like you should do this, and you go, well, that's fard, right? And so on. And then there when it says Allah loves, this is really a mustahab, you know. And the reason why maybe you don't know the reason why I say it's why I make that parsing connection is that you can go to Jannah without being somebody that Allah like super loves. This is Christianity has this idea that it's like love for everyone, but it's got this tension with the heaven and the hell. Um, but in Islam, there's this that you can receive mercy. So you don't have to be like you can be somebody whose life was not heroic in a pro justice Allah pleasing way, who has garnered love from Allah. You can receive Allah's mercy, and you can hang out in Al Araf, and then you get let in and there's a beautiful snack bar and drinks. There's drinks. There's punch. You know, eventually you'll be allowed to drink from the punch bowl, and it won't be spiked with. If you want the spiked punch bowl, they got to go to the other garden up the stairs. But anyway, so this is the also the distinction between Ar Rahman and Ar Rahim. If I can speculate a little bit. And the course of the Injil is that if you want to receive the Rahma, you have to give the Rahim. Is a proportionality in this. And this is what I've always taught is that marriage is a tariqah for everyday people to attain tazkiyah and to improve their muhabbat for Allah through the theophany of reconciliation unto the other, which is what it's about. And so when you get angry in the relationship, it's a failure to appreciate the theophany. You might even say you're temporarily in some way going to war with your spouse, you're going to war with Allah because the microcosm of Allah is in the relationship. and the macrocosm to the superlative Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most merciful. This is the conformal boundary of ontic, pupescence. That's good. Ontic pupescence. Yeah, I like that. Maybe that was those Amara for just now. I don't know. I like that. That really hit me. Um, so there's the famous hadith of that Allah yearned to be known, and so created the world, or loved to be known. And so I think that's why we're here, actually. So I'm actually really grateful that I was done an injustice in my divorce. It went a little too far, but I came to appreciate the humility of it, and the passion of that. Is also sort of that it's a bipolar thing. It's not completely ordered thought and behavior, but okay. It helped me to go deeper into the pain of the human heart, which we all often share. And there are those who don't, and they don't know. They don't know what this is, because they've just had it too easy of a time. I haven't met a lot of those people, but I assume they exist. But for most of us, it's the sorrow, right? So I think if you're coming at like the idea of like, is feminism kufr? Are all the Muslim becoming feminist? TFR is gonna fall over. We're just like, it's just the end times and just forget about it. Well, maybe it is the end times, but what can I say? I mean, it's got there's a lot of end timesy stuff going on lately. Um, it doesn't seem to be abating, to be honest. However, those times, those plural times, end times. So you don't know how much time is in each of those times. Could be a lot of times. So you don't know. It might be the rest of your life. Anyway, the point is, I prefer to take a more positive attitude because of the hadith that if you are, holding a sapling and you see that the hour is upon you, you should go ahead and like, get that sapling good and planted anyway, because it counts. It all counts. And this optimism is also a big part of Islam, right? And this is something I think we all take a lot of strength from in the Ummah. And so yeah, just like I think to say that feminism is kufr is kind of like saying that like geocentrism is kufr. It's like what are you talking about? Like kufr has to do with like la ilaha illallah, and then to some extent, and this is where the perennialism debate comes in, Muhammadun Rasulullah, right? Uh, such a beautiful phrase. But it isn't necessarily kufr. It can be kufr. I think what was done to me was an act of kufr, and so it was a sin that was done under auspices of rejecting prophetic guidance, right? So it was a sin that, and it was also kufr, you know. And I pray for her hidayah, that she repents. And if it's up to me on Judgment Day, I'm not gonna push her into the bloody lake of fire. Like if she's gonna go down, it's gonna be because Allah would not accept her. But she's done good deeds. Like I don't know, maybe. Like I hope. Like I sincerely hope. I actually don't want anything bad to happen to her in the dunya or the akhirah. Um, but it's not up to me, the latter part. But I can try to make things pleasant in the dunya. Um, it does seem like we can redefine Islamic feminism, where it's Islam first, and then it's feminism, and we can think of it as having an additional wave of feminism, right? So we were from the '90s with third wave feminism, and I think you can reframe this under more conservative religious concepts. And we kind of like, feminism is almost the wrong word. It seems polarizing. It may turn people off, but it's really about redefining the social contract, or not redefining, but reinterpreting. reinterpreting the social contract of men and women, where reinterpreting from Surinisa even, right? Which turned my ex-wife off from converting to Islam because she thought it was too patriarchal. But the if statement, Khalid was very good to point this out in the verse about Nashuz, is that the if statement applies, right? So the Nashuz is not so much about this guy is born with an entitlement as a man that you should be respecting. It's that he's bringing home the bacon, and it's just ingrateful to that boarding situation, and you have a path to get out of that marriage, and you get a 4 month reprieve where you get free rent, and then you can go look around and hop, do something else, right? Um, and like, okay, so women want to work so they don't have to beg for like a new iPhone. And I think part-time work is cool, and then you can still be a mom. So I don't, that seems simple enough. And it seems like I would also appreciate that because then I don't have to worry about a bunch of unanticipated expenses. And then it becomes like a fight if I don't want to, if I want to get it, if I want to get the Huawei and save a little. But no, it shouldn't. This is silly. This stuff should be like systematically organized. Um, it should be a zero. You should have a zero tolerance policy for yourself as a man, as a Muslim man, especially to express anger and to hurl insults at the spouse. And I'm guilty of it, and a lot of guys are guilty of it. And it's just not useful anymore. It's not how the system works anymore. And then it gets used against you, and then it gets turned into a provocative situation. And then any weakness, so your anger is no longer an expression of strength, and it's an expression of a weakness that gets leveraged against you legally, and it gets turned into a bloody legal deposition or something, right? And there's this OECD wide gender violence concept that's being introduced across many countries, where basically men are presumed more guilty for kind of the same level of toxic behavior in relationships. And this is kind of a kufri thing, this is not from the Quran, but it is the law. It's the law of the land now in a lot of countries. And it's on the Muslima to not abuse that power that the law gives her in this dialectical cyclical confusion, let's say, where it's gone to one excess or another. Like men don't have property rights, men don't have parental rights. All of these things have to be asserted after the fact at cost. That's and then the judges will be biased against men. That's not just. But I respect I respect where they're coming from. What I want is for where this is going to be better than what it seems like right now, which doesn't, which seems it seems like it's just killing the family and squeezing people out economically, and creating an environment of suspicion and like a sword of Damocles. And that sword of Damocles is meant to intimidate men the way that women used to be intimidated by normalized violence, and that these intimidated men will behave themselves because they know that they're constantly leveraged, and that their lady has just a legal lever to like evict them at any time based on even lies or true things that have added lies in them or whatever, right? Um, and that's a lot of power. The women have a lot of legal power these days in countries like Chile, where I think in Europe they're doing this. I don't know if they're quite doing it. It depends on the state in the United States. I don't think it's quite evidentiary standards. You can get a jury. Maybe it's a little better in the US in some of these ways. Um, but for the Ummah to actually lead, and for the kind of clarity and thought that I'm trying to bring to Fek and Akita in this context of maybe there's like a fourth or maybe it's fifth wave by now, feminism, that we don't even need to call it feminism. but if it helps people, you could call it feminism. And if it doesn't help people, then don't call it feminism, right? That's problematic because you got to shift gears based on who you're talking to, but it's something you could do with enough anticipation. And if we actually formalize this kind of fiqh and we teach these sisters, this is like a way you can think about Islam and feminism or post feminism or whatever. And you kind of get over feminism, but you get useful things out of it. And then the men are like just they apply these kind of Sufi techniques, the breathing control, doing your zikr to manage their emotions so they can swallow their anger like the Quran prescribes. And if you never have an incident in the relationship, it won't create your marriage still might fail. Maybe she's not that into it, she gets bored, whatever. She wants other things in life. That's possible, but it really erodes the marriage when you have these fights and this trauma gets into the memory and it's always there. It can be forgiven, but it's still remembered. It's in the nervous system now. So if you're too much scary husband, it will ultimately just destroy the marriage. It used to not because, it's a different time, right? Um, and it is what it is. I think we have to be grateful to Allah that times change. We don't have infant mortality. Jihad can be more effective now doing like internet protests or live protests than going and having a pitched battle with a bunch of archers and so on. Maybe that's good, like that's why terrorism's dumb is they do jihad and like trying to do it old school because they're frustrated because the Ottoman Empire fell. So there's no mufti to tell them to go do it. So they go kill a bunch of people and then it actually makes things worse. It wasn't strategic. It was bad jihad. It's just times changed, right? And I think we need to be grateful to the reality because Allah is a hawk, the absolute truth. And the reality of men and women in this day and age is tough, and it can get a lot. There's so much room. There's so much room to improve, and I think the Ummah could really be an example here. And we've got a lot of work to do. If you look at like Muslim marriage or the way people are dealing with their Muslim marriages, there's a lot of room for improvement. And I'm just trying to be real and integrate whatever hikmah I've got out of all my suffering and put that into the jet stream. So inshallah, the ummah may have families that don't get divorced, and where also people are happy. They're not just sticking together out of momentum. They actually, they give each other massages and they have a little time. They hook up and they're kissy in the mornings, and it's nice. I don't, and I know there are a lot of marriages that hold together out of traditionalism where the woman's not feeling that and the guy's not really tuned in. And this is where tasawwuf is really applicable to everyday people, not just ascetic types who do 5 hours of zikr on Mawlid and other nights. So I think I've said everything I need to say in this chat. Thanks for listening, those who stuck around, and I hope this is, inshallah, as useful for the women to understand and trust men more, and kind of synthesize thought on feminism in a more holistic way with the Quran, and that also for the men to just try this strategy, be stoic, don't ever like no matter how, don't let them get you by provoking you. It's it's silly that this is what relationships have become, but this strategy might actually work. Inshallah. Uh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.